What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are back with another movie review for you, for the movie in particular that was quoted by myself way earlier on in the year as being my most anticipated film of 2021. That film is Kenneth Branagh's very personal, very heartfelt, very different film, Belfast. If you haven't seen the trailer for Belfast, I'd recommend you pause this video and you go and watch it first, because if you didn't really take to the trailer, then I guarantee you my review is probably not going to change your mind. Belfast is not a film for everybody. It's not a film for casual moviegoers, but at the same time, it's not really a film for die-hard film fanatics either. It's not a film that's really made for necessarily an audience in particular. If anything, it feels like Kenneth Branagh kind of made the film for himself. That is both why I love this film, but also why there are some things about this film that I can't necessarily recommend to everybody. So let's get into what I liked first. First of all, if you couldn't tell just from the trailer or just from promotional material or whatever, this film is absolutely stunning to look at. Nowadays, we're kind of seeing the black and white format kind of make a little bit of a resurgence. It sort of got repopularized with The Lighthouse and kind of made like a little bit of a soft comeback. Obviously, we have Belfast, we have the upcoming tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Cohen, and black and white just kind of seems to be one of those things that, like, it doesn't happen super often, but when it does, it tends to elevate rather than take away from a film. Another really good example of this is The Artist, which came out back in, I believe, 2017 or 2016, which also kind of did a few different things different because it was also a silent film, which was like the first time in like decades that had happened in a major release. I'm getting way off topic. My point being is that this film doesn't feel like it's just black and white for the sake of being black and white. There is an actual emotional context to the reason why it's filmed that way, and I'll get more into that here in a minute when I talk about the story and its impact, but just suffice to say that it doesn't feel like a gimmick in this film. There are also some really cool moments and usages of color in this film, which again, I'll talk about when I get more into the story and about how I think the film is supposed to be viewed. But it's not also just beautiful because of its black and white aesthetic and because of its usages of sporadic color, but it's also really beautiful because the cinematography and the character blocking within the scenes is absolutely stellar. There's just these amazing moments that I would have never thought to block certain characters that way, using just these natural like lanes of separation. And after watching it, I actually brought that up to my brother, who pointed out the reason that it feels more effective is because black and white gives you so much more depth to a scene. So think about it like this. In this scene from Belfast, you can kind of get this idea of this separation of characters. You get this idea of, you know, there's these characters having a conversation, this character is listening in, and you have this natural barrier that shows you what exactly is happening within the emotional context of this scene. But then if you take a similar sort of scene from a film with color, and it loses a little bit of that emotional complexity because you have all these additional artwork and color and contrasting different segments to sort of draw your attention away from the characters. It's not a bad thing, and I'm not saying that color is like indistinguishably bad and or worse than black and white. I'm just saying that it does provide a stronger emotional depth when you're using certain like unconventional forms of blocking with these conversations and with these cinematography, because you get more depth with just this stark contrast of black and white. And because of that, it means that the cinematography in Belfast is just absolutely phenomenal. There's also a lot of really long one takes. And when there is editing, it is noticeable. I won't claim that they're trying to make the film look like a one take, but there's a bunch of really incredibly cool, complex shots and a lot of really unconventional ways of putting characters into like bottom of frame instead of like centering them and going into close-ups and stuff like that. Just overall, just a visually masterpiece of a film in my opinion. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the acting here real quick, because the acting is absolutely stellar across the board. There is literally no bad actor in this entire film. So first of all, Jude Hill as Buddy is probably one of the better child actors that I've seen in a film in a long time. Now, I will go out of my way to say that there's not a whole lot of films I could think of off the top of my head where there were child actors that really impressed me in general. The first thing I could think of that came to mind to use as a reference point against Belfast was You Were Never Really Here with Joaquin Phoenix, but it's also such a completely contrasting tone in terms of film that it kind of feels unfair to compare the two of them. But like I said, I was just trying to think of another movie with a child actor that impressed me, and that was the first one that came to mind. But nonetheless, Jude Hill does a fantastic job as Buddy. He does a great job of balancing humor, of, you know, he has this great like sarcastic wit to him. He's like sort of playfully sarcastic with like his, you know, his brother and his parents and his friends and stuff like that. He has a great sense of wit about him, but he's also a very emotionally complex person. and viewing this world through the eyes of a young child who is living through this turmoil time of these really complicated events and these really complicated political intrigues. It's very interesting to see sort of like this starry-eyed, well, for lack of a better word, black and white look at the world and trying to figure out, to use his words, where is the fork in the path? Which road do you take? And Jude Hill just does a fantastic job of portraying that through this wonderful, childlike, simplistic view of the world. Similarly, Jamie Dornan is absolutely phenomenal in this role. I am so glad that Jamie Dornan is starting to get more recognition for his acting because the man is absolutely a talented powerhouse of an actor. He kind of gets pigeonholed a lot because unfortunately he was in, the 50 Shades of Grey series, which are atrociously bad films. Even though they're not bad because of him, he's probably the only reason to even watch those films. But I watch, series like The Fall or movies like Siege of Jodhpur, and you're like, man, Jamie Dornan is such an accomplished, talented man. I hope he just gets the recognition that he needs to really make something spectacular. I don't know if Belfast is necessarily his most spectacular role that he'll ever have, but I will say it is right now definitely in the running for the best performances he's ever put on film. He is absolutely fantastic in this movie. He does a great job of balancing an emotionally complex, fragile character who's doing his best to keep a family together through a trying time. But watching Jamie Dornan go from that to being this sort of, going from like this placating, like sort of trying to make everything work sort of character to this angry, vengeful character who will do anything to protect his family is wonderful to watch, and I could not imagine anybody but Jamie Dornan in the role. Catriona Balfe also deserves a spectacular shout out. She does a absolutely tremendous job in this film. I keep using these really strong adjectives to describe the acting in this film, but that really is the best way to put it because there's no duds in the entire film. Catriona obviously plays a much more emotionally vulnerable character because she's the one who primarily goes through the majority of raising these children through this really, really rough time in Northern Ireland. And because their dad was always sort of absent, Catriona's character always sort of picks up the slack and does everything that sort of needs to be done. And she does so in a wonderfully vulnerable but strong-willed kind of way. It never comes off as forced, and she always feels like she's just one step behind breaking down and having a complete emotional mental fracture. But because her character is so strong-willed and so effective at what she does and so caring and kind and loving of her children, it really makes you believe that she is just towing that line between those two fractured states of mind, but is so strong because she's able to do it. I don't know how else to really explain it, but that was the best way that I could think of. Ciarán Hinds also gives a great performance as the grandpa of the entire story. He sort of rounds out like the emotional complexities of Buddy into the characters like his mom and his dad, and sort of plays like this pivotal central role of kind of being the catharsis, but also the key turning point for the events that are going to eventually happen towards the end of the film. And Ciarán Hinds has always been a great actor. I don't really think I've seen any film with him that I felt like he didn't in some way improve upon in terms of like the structure and the intrigue and his dialogue and his character motivation and everything. He does a great job in this. He delivers some very emotional, laugh out loud moments that really, really do kind of warm your heart. So I've said a lot of really, really good things about this film, but what I haven't really touched on is the story, and I wanted to leave that to the last because I think it really is going to be the deciding factor between should I see this film or should I really not bother? The thing is, this story is at the end of the day still technically a sort of coming of age story, but it's told through a very unique lens. For those of you who don't know, Belfast is strongly based on Kenneth Branagh's actual real life experiences going through the 1960s to early 1970s sort of IRA revolution in Northern Ireland, and the decision his family eventually makes to leave Belfast, this city that he's known his entire life with all of his friends, his family, and whatnot. It's a very emotional film for director Kenneth Branagh, and you can tell because the film is portrayed in such a like simplistic view of this, like I said, like this childlike view of the world, but the emotional complexities that are rounded out by all the adult characters create this portrait of extreme emotional distress, heartwarming moments of just family love and warmth, but this underlying tone of terror of what is to come around the corner. And so at the end of the day, it's not really like a heartwarming coming of age story, but it's also not this really dour historical drama. But at the same time, it doesn't ever really truly meet in the middle. I realize this makes it sound like the film almost has a conflicting theme at points, and maybe to some people they might feel that way, but it really does just depend on how you go in to view the film. If you go in to view the film expecting it to fall into these specific subgenres, then you will probably walk out of the film feeling like you either wasted your money or that you didn't really do enough due diligence to really enjoy the film as it's supposed to be intended. But what I will say is that if you do go into the film with an open mind and you look at it from the perspective of this is a director just telling his personal story and it's really not made for us, you do come away with a much broader appreciation of what he tackled in this film, and you will probably be much more emotionally moved by it. At the end of the day, if I had to really say that there was anything negative about Belfast, it would be that sometimes it does feel like the humor might come a little bit in an inappropriate moment, or sometimes the music doesn't quite gel with me every now and then. It's, again, none of it is bad, but there were moments where like just a certain song played or a certain tune was used, and it just kind of sucked me out of the moment for just a moment. It never lasted all that long, and immediately the film would pick back up and kind of put me back on my feet, but it is something worth mentioning. And I will say that as much as I love all the lead actors in this film, there were a couple of supporting roles that either could have used a little bit more fleshing out or maybe just a little bit additional work. There's some of the like secondary antagonist characters as well as Buddy's brother Will, who just never really feel like they quite get the same level of depth and care given to like the core like quadrilogy of characters. But that's okay. We don't necessarily need it, but it is something worth mentioning that it's at times Kenneth Branagh almost wants to make you feel like you have to care for these characters as much as the others, but he never necessarily gives you the exact same level of reasons and depth that he gives for you to care about the other characters. Hopefully that makes sense. But at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, Belfast is a truly heartwarming story. It is a really, really, really carefully crafted film that is stuffed to the gills with artistic talent, amazing performances, great usage of music for the most part, wonderful characters for the most part, a very brief runtime, and an absolutely stellar emotional core that by the end of it will either have you in tears or smiling from ear to ear. It's not a perfect film, it has its pitfalls, but it is a worthwhile viewing experience and worth a ticket price in my opinion. For that, Belfast gets an 8 out of 10. So thanks for watching the video, guys. If you did make it all the way through, be sure to leave me a comment down below on what you thought of Belfast if you've seen it or if you plan on seeing it. I would love to hear from you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends. Be sure to follow us on social media as well as Discord, Facebook, Reddit, all that fun stuff. We're not always great at always posting to social media because we lead very busy lives and we're not always able to make sure that everything gets posted. But nonetheless, be sure to follow us over in there. All the links are in the description down below. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you next time.